Why hello there, Sir Richard Cackington III here. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today we are going to be discussing the nerf that just made no sense. Season of the Worthy for Destiny 2 is winding down, and at the change of every season, we get a big sandbox update. This is definitely something I'm hoping to see, if not completely reversed, at least partially reversed, and I think that would really add to the health of the PvP and the PvE meta. So what the heck am I talking about? Well, to illustrate that, let's look at a new gun I got. It's this Distant Tumulus. This is dropping from random engrams, and as you can see, it's a rapid fire frame sniper. It actually came with a magazine extended perk with appended mag, and this is the first time ever we're seeing not only clown cartridge, where reloading will randomly overfill the weapon from reserves, but also firing line on a rapid fire, and they're both here on this same roll. This thing is making waves in the community. At least it would be if it was last season. But unfortunately, due to a very unfortunate sniper nerf that really impacted them in both PvP and PvE, no one cares about this thing. Like, this should be a groundbreaking new tool in the PvE arsenal with this role, but it's not, because snipers as a whole, their play has gone down dramatically because of this nerf. So let's take a look at what happened. So, firstly, of course, the Izanagi's burden was nerfed substantially. Now, we can sit here and argue all day whether or not this was too much or whatever, but the fact is the Izanagi's burden nerf made sense. It was overwhelmingly the best option to use in so many different things. So, again, logically, it makes sense to nerf it. But then we get the overall sniper rifles nerf, and we can see what exactly was done. Damage to major enemies and above have been reduced to pre-Shadowkeep values, so this is around a 20% nerf to every sniper rifle in the game for PvE. Then, adaptive frame snipers, their precision multiplier was reduced from 3.25 times to 2.95 times. Now, in PvP, this means that adaptives, so stuff like the beloved sniper rifle, can no longer one-shot headshot supers. And in PvE, this just means a loss in damage overall if you're using those type of weapons, and there are a lot of really good sniper rolls, stuff that comes with triple tap and rapid fire, etc. Off the top of my head, the sniper rifle from the moon. The Tranquility, this was actually an adaptive frame that could spawn with an extended mag perk and auto-loading holster, and either 4th times the charm or firing line. This was seeing legitimate play in PvE, but because of this nerf, now nobody is using it because the DPS value has gone down so dramatically. And then lastly, we have rapid fire snipers. Base impact has been reduced from 100 to 90. Now, mainly this was to impact PvP. Now you can't, double body someone really quickly with rapid fires, but this also did impact PvE because the base damage is simply scaled up in PvE. So those, including the Distant Tumulus I showed you guys, had their DPS values reduced because of this. So why does this make no sense? Well, I think overall the impact in both of the PvP and PvE metas have been detrimented because of this, not improved. So for PvP, I'm mainly going to be focusing on PvE today, but for PvP, the fact that adaptives can't one-shot headshot supers have pushed them out of the meta, and rapid fires not being able to double body have pushed them out of the meta, and the result is that there's really no reason to use a sniper rifle other than the Revoker Pinnacle sniper rifle. That thing has pushed pretty much every other sniper out of the meta. Not only does it get ammo back if you miss, but it can one-shot headshot supers. There was an argument to use something like the Beloved or, a God Roll Twilight Oath or something previous to this patch, but after, it's all Revoker. But in PvE, I think this makes even less sense, mainly the complete reversal of the sniper rifle buff. This is really the thing that has me racking my brain to understand Bungie's thought process, because if you completely reverse that buff, the 20% damage buff to major enemies and above, which they did, you have to ask the question, why was that buff made in the first place? Bungie clearly identified that sniper rifles were underperforming, and that's why they buffed them. The only other alternative is that they randomly buffed them or accidentally buffed them, and I don't think that's true. They clearly looked at snipers and went, you know what, these are not seeing play, we need to give them some love. So, to partially reverse that buff would make a ton of sense. If Bungie said, look, you know, it was a little bit too much, we made snipers a bit too powerful, and therefore we're reducing that buff by 10%. So snipers are still better overall than their pre-Shadowkeep value, but it's not a complete reversal. The fact that they didn't do that and it was a complete reversal again means that you're basically saying Bungie was just randomly buffing them and was completely wrong to buff them in the first place. And the only scenario I can see where that maybe makes sense is if Bungie purposely overbuffed them to like remind people how good sniper rifles were, and then once we started using them, they were like, haha, just kidding, but you use them, remember how they're actually pretty decent, keep using them. But again, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And frankly, that's really overreaching of me to assume that weird scenario. What's much more likely is that, you know, they're basically calling themselves out and saying they made a mistake in the first place, but I don't think they did. I think that first Shadowkeep buff was very healthy for the meta, and it introduced a lot of interest in a bunch of guns. When that sniper rifle buff hit, myself and a bunch of other people I play with were legitimately going after old school weapons to try to get, you know, some of the guns that are impacted by this. The best example is that we were actually going and playing the Last Wish raid more to get the Supremacy. The Supremacy being a kinetic weapon, hits a little harder, and it can get triple tap and an extended mag perk and ambitious assassin, and actually it turned out that rapid fires were probably the best overall archetype for just spitting out a ton of damage with a legendary weapon. So we were all chasing that Supremacy, and before we could get our god rolls, this nerf hit. And now our interest to go and get that old weapon has completely fallen off a cliff, and it goes into the distant Tumulus example. This would have been such a cracked weapon and everyone would be experimenting and trying to chase this, but now no one cares because sniper rifles have lost their place in the PvE meta. And I think prior to this nerf, aside from the Izanagi's Burden, which was clearly an outlier, you did see a decent amount of variety within the meta. You had grenade launchers being a huge force, you had sniper rifles as well, and there were other alternatives. There was shotguns, especially I'm thinking the Lord of Wolves, which actually out DPS'd the Izanagi's Burden off the bat. Swords as well were and still are part of the PvE damage dealing meta. The thing that's really interesting is that Bungie actually cited, you know, oh, way too many sniper rifles are seeing play, and it's pushing some of the close quarter options out of the meta, and they actually say that. But guess what, Bungie? The reason no one uses shotguns in raids is because every single boss in the game has a stomp mechanic. I would love to go up to the raid boss at the end of Garden of Salvation and try to shotgun him, but he's gonna stomp me. Actually, that's a bad example because that guy actually lifts himself up into the air completely out of the way of anyone trying to use a shotgun in that encounter. So Bungie, if you design encounters, which Garden of Salvation has 2 raid encounters that are specifically, seems like, meant for sniper rifles, long range damage phases, obviously people are going to use snipers. The fact that you can look at the data and say, oh, too many people are using snipers, when you have a raid, which is basically one of the only ways to get pinnacle weapons, that specifically calls for long range weapons, like, it just makes absolutely no sense to me. And to add on to that whole point, the topic of swords really proves that. Swords are actually cracked when it comes to DPS. I mean, you can cheese Riven with swords. In fact, that's probably the easiest method out there. But the fact that you cheese Riven with swords and don't cheese anything else with swords is because those close quarter options just aren't viable or just aren't available with so many other bosses. Again, stomp mechanics and other things just completely eliminate the possibility to use these close range options. So the fact that Bungie doesn't even consider that and just thinks like, oh, because sniper rifles are so powerful, that's why everyone are using them. No, it's because, you know, the middle boss in Garden of Salvation literally runs away. Like, how am I going to shotgun that guy? And as a result of all of this, you essentially have a de-evolution of the meta. Essentially, the best stuff to use now is Mountaintop Anarchy in a lot of scenarios. And that's just what it was way back in the day. So we've essentially taken the meta, and instead of adding to it, instead of injecting it with some spice, we've gone back to many seasons ago. And for those of us who've been playing for many seasons, that's not exactly what we want. Now, of course, there is a little bit of new blood. The Xenophage, if you specifically have a bunch of Titans using the Actium War Rig, is a legitimate option for DPS. The Whisper is back on the menu again, and the new Heir Apparent is an interesting choice. But overall, we lost more options than we gained, and so I think Bungie really needs to take another crack at rebalancing sniper rifles in PvE and PvP too. Like, the fact that the Revoker is really the only option out there makes no sense. Now, I'm definitely not calling for a complete reversal of this nerf. I think somewhere in the middle between where it was in after Shadowkeep, where snipers were by far pretty darn dominant, even though there was a lot of other alternatives, sniper rifles were the go-to, and then now where they're completely not part of the meta, just half everything. All the nerfs you did and all the buffs you did, combine those, whatever is split right down the middle, reduce the values by 10% instead of 20, the adaptive frame, like buff them by a little bit, rapid fires, make them do, offset damage in PvE. Maybe they don't double body in PvP, but at least bring their base damage up in PvE to account for that. And so, those are my thoughts on the issue, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think? Are you still finding sniper rifles are successful? Did you like the pre-nerf meta? Did you like the pre-Shadowkeep meta? And what is working for you now? Let me know in the comment section down below. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, found this informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content, so much of this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.